Welcome back to World Talks. With me here, Anna Kalczynska. This time we are centering on the detention of Ekrem İmamoğlu. Ekrem İmamoğlu, the mayor of Istanbul, arrests just days before he was likely to be elected leader of Turkey's opposition, precipitated significant political and social upheaval. As this development is poised to influence the nation's political landscape, let's reckon about the consequences of Recep Tayyip Erdogan escalation. Karol Wasilewski, analyst of the Center for Eastern Studies, joins us now. Good morning, sir.
Good morning.
Let's start with your interpretation of these events and the arrest of Istanbul Mayor Ekrem İmamoğlu. What are the legal justifications given by Turkish authorities, and do you find them credible?
Well, can I find them credible? I really doubt that, especially that both Ekrem İmamoğlu and CHP expected all these events to happen, well, quite before today. So we have seen authorities' attempts to, let's say, make Ekrem İmamoğlu's life definitely harder. Probably you remember that when Ekrem İmamoğlu was running for a mayor of Istanbul, the elections have been cancelled. This was the first, huge obstacle to his political career. In renewed elections, he won in a landslide against Binali Yildirim, AKP, the ruling party heavyweight. Post 2023, opposition expected that life will get even harder for them. They made a political mistake in 2023 by appointing Kemal Kılıçdaroğlu, then leader of CHP, as a presidential candidate. They were successful in local elections, and they had a feeling that this may be the last battle. I would say that the reality somehow proved them true. These attempts to basically stop Ekrem İmamoğlu from running are confirming the opposition confirming the opposition views that any attempt of Ekrem İmamoğlu to be an official presidential challenger to Tayyip Erdogan will be quashed.
All right. So there have been big protests after this move. The protests underscore also a deep-seated discontent, I understand, with the current administration's actions. So could the arrest of İmamoğlu lead to sustained civil unrest?
Well, these are already the biggest protests in Turkey since 2013, since Gezi, which, as you probably are aware of, are kind of event that formed the political life of Turkey. So these are already, again, the biggest protest in 12 years. The opposition started to feel the moment, I would say, only yesterday. Because only yesterday, Özgür Özel was able to, let's say, influence the crowd. Because initially, lots of Turks have been claiming that it is the crowds who influence the opposition. So this is the first important thing that we should take care of when we analyze the future of this protest. Whether there will be a synergy between the crowds and the opposition. Whether the opposition will be able to, let's say, moderate the discussion, to steer the crowd into some directions or not. Özgür Özel has called for massive protests. And this is, I would say, the first step. Another step is the one you mentioned, a kind of civil disobedience campaign, which will be much more problematic to the authorities. I think that today's night will be consequential when it comes to the future of these protests. We will have to take a closer look at the reaction of pro-government media, of Tayyip Erdogan himself, because I think that only yesterday we got some symptoms that they are getting nervous. If they will be even more nervous this night, then we may also see another step from the opposition. But again, I would like to conclude with saying that all depends on the synergy between the opposition and the crowds. If there is no synergy, if the crowds will have different agenda only loosely tied to the agenda of the opposition, then it is hard to imagine that something as civil disobedience campaign will happen.
How about Recep Tayyip Erdogan? What makes him think he can get away with this? With Donald Trump in power in the US, does he think he enjoys impunity like other strong leaders? Why did he go as far as to arrest Ekrem İmamoğlu? He was indicted before, but this time they went so far as to arrest.
Okay, let's start from domestic issues. So first of all, Tayyip Erdogan thinks that the regime is consolidated. It is strong. There are no divisive figures inside the regime, and this is the first thing. Secondly, he thinks that the opposition is divided, which to the extent may be true, because not every person in the opposition thinks that Ekrem İmamoğlu should be the candidate. There is also some kind of nervousness, I would say, on the side of people from the CHP. Thirdly, he thinks he's quite safe when it comes to the domestic front, because he has initiated, I mean, not he personally, but the authorities have initiated so-called Kurdish opening. So they are kind of showing the direction for the society that, look, here in this direction, there will be a democratization. This is in the interest, strategic interest of Turkey and Turkish society. And what opposition does is not. This is what Tayyip Erdogan precisely said yesterday, that this is just an internal made matter of CHP that is trying to hijack the agenda. And these are the domestic reasons. When it comes to international reasons, of course, you're right. Tayyip Erdogan feels that there will be no reaction from Trump, and rightly so, because there will be no reaction from U.S. administration. As far as I remember, the Department of State has already said that they won't look much into Turkish domestic affairs. But he also thinks that he won't get any solid reaction from the side on the side of the European Union, because the European Union will concentrate on hard security, knowing that Turkey is a kind of, let's say, risk assurance in time of Trump's uncertainty. But the problem is that Turkey has been aiming and has been repeating it over and over again for the last few weeks, that it is aiming not only at enhancing relationship with the European Union on security front, but it also aims at renewing accession negotiations. I mean, Turkey demands the whole package from the European Union.
Yes.
And the problem is that with such a decision, with such a, I would say, evolution of domestic politics, you know, you can't even imagine that any politician in European Union will even consider talking about renewing accession negotiations. What I want to say here is that this is a situation in which domestic politics heavily influence Turkey's strategic interests.
Exactly, and this comes as a very unfortunate, at a very unfortunate time. We've just seen Donald Tusk paying a visit and having, closer ties sealed with Recep Tayyip Erdogan. Now the EU strongly condemned this arrest. We also heard one of its leaders, Giacomo Filibeck, from the Party of European Socialists, calling it a full-scale attack on Turkey's democracy. So you're right, probably, that European Union will not interfere more. However, the future of the succession is called into question. So what impact can it have on a longer run on the relationships with the European Union?
Okay, so I have already said that it is hard to imagine that this whole package that Turkey aims for will be granted. And why I'm repeating this? Because once again, I would like to underline that domestic issues have, impacted strategic interests of Turkey. And this is the first thing. Secondly, when speaking of wider repercussions, also from the point of view of the European Union, well, Turkey's economy in the last, I would say, 2 years under Mehmet Şimşek has been in this, well, let's call it renewal process. Turkey designed wonderful strategies on how to stabilize economy, how to signal the markets that it is a stable economy, that it won't, simply burn reserve of the central bank to defend Turkish liras. They designed wonderful strategies on how to attract foreign investors, especially from Europe, to Turkey. And again, this is something that heavily impacts this strategic interest on the economic front. So this is the second angle. The third is the angle I've already mentioned, namely the one with the PKK and the so-called Kurdish opening. The Kurds have been, I don't want to say hesitant, but well, let's go with hesitant if I've already used that phrase. They have been hesitant towards the Kurdish opening for one reason, because they have already noticed that this time, this peace process also serves Erdogan as an instrument to limit the opposition's room of maneuver. They were basically afraid that this time the Kurdish opening will serve the goal of further de-democratization of Turkey. Again, domestic politics are influencing strategic interests of Turkey, because Kurdish problem and the Kurdish opening, solving the issue that has absolutely dominated Turkish political agenda for the last 50 years, having immense consequences, loss of lives, loss of economic opportunities, and so on, also impacting Turkey's relations with the European Union. Solving the issue would be a huge win for Tayyip Erdogan and for country itself. And again, domestic politics interfered with strategic interest. The fourth angle, and lastly and very briefly, when you look at the dynamics of the protests, you can see that these are not only protests aimed at, protesting against stopping Imamolu from running for the presidential election. These are also protests of the young people that want to have their vision of Turkey implemented, their chances gained due to wonderful education they got materialize in the future Turkey. Yeah? And this is another strategic angle. The protests of youth who feel that this may be the last moment to regain their country, their opportunities to develop themselves in Turkey.
Thank you so much, Karol Wasilewski, analyst from the Center of Eastern Studies. So Georgia, Serbia, Hungary, and now Turkey sees social unrest and social disobedience. So interesting developments to follow here on TVP World. Thank you so much for being with us here on World Talks.
Thank you.
That concludes this edition of World Talks. Thank you for being with us.